This is things I wish I could say in Sunday school. I want to share some thoughts and ideas that are different than what we usually hear. My goal is to be really honest rather than inherently faith-promoting. I hope these ideas may spark some interesting discussions with your friends, families, or classes. Please enjoy. This is a lesson for June 2nd through 8th and June 9th through 15th. Doctrine and Covenants sections 58 through 63. Today's topics are Unfulfilled Promises, Ezra Booth, and Chaste thoughts. These lessons bring up a lot of personal stuff for me. I'm going to share more personal stories than normal today. The lesson begins with the Colesville Saints again. They had already been promised by Joseph Smith that they could settle near Kirtland on Lehman Copley's property. They moved their families there. But the property wasn't actually secured. Joseph Smith made the promise to these people, banking on Lehman Copley's generosity. I believe he was trying to be generous, but Joseph Smith kept taking so much from him, he had to cut it off. Anyway, Lehman told them that they couldn't stay on his property. Joseph Smith's next plan was to send all these families to Missouri to build up Zion there. They did it, but they were disappointed with Missouri. There wasn't much of a town in Independence. It was more of an outpost. The people didn't want the Mormons there. Bottom line, nothing about it felt like Zion. And that's what Joseph Smith promised them. When I think about it from the Colesville Saints' perspective, it's devastating. They are basically refugees. Their prophet keeps making them promises, and they have uprooted and moved their families multiple times based on those promises, and they have nothing to show for it. I would have a really hard time if this was the result of my choices for my family. I want to talk a bit about unfulfilled promises. The church makes a lot of promises, some explicit, some implicit. The crux of these promises is following the church program will lead you to a good, happy life. Spouse, kids, home, good job, etc. We're also told that these are the things that good people want. It's really just the LDS version of the American dream. One problem is that not everyone wants all these things. But the bigger problem is that these promises aren't real. It works out for enough people that it's easy to believe it and hope for it. But there are many that will never have the simple good life they hope for. I remember a friend of mine did this lesson years ago when I was in an over age 30 singles ward. She connected the feelings that these early saints had of continually being promised Zion when the reality was far from it, to our feelings still being single and over 30 in the church. None of us wanted to be single. We all thought that we would have been married and started a family by the ages we were. And we felt like the church had promised us it would work out. We just had to stay faithful. But it hadn't worked out for any of the people there. It sucked. Because what do? In a way, I boil it down to two choices. You can continue to hope based on the flimsy promises of the authority, or you can let go of the promises, grieve the loss, and forge your own path toward happiness. I saw a lot of people making both choices. Neither is easy, but I will say that the people I saw who made the conscious choice to let go of those promises lived a happier life. They weren't waiting for happiness in the future. They were making themselves happy in the present. I don't think anyone's life works out perfectly. Some certainly have a much easier time than others. But we can still make it good, especially when we are in the driver's seat of our own lives. When we haven't yielded control of our lives to the church or to our parents or to a spouse or even our kids. When we are conscious of our choices, that's what leads to real happiness. Now the personal story. When I was 25, I really wanted to get married and have kids. I was in grad school at the time. I had had a couple girlfriends, but never been engaged or anything. I fasted and prayed for some guidance. My real question was, how long will it be until I get married? I felt like I got an answer from God, and this is a top 5 spiritual experience for me in my life. The answer was, it's going to be a while longer. At the time, I felt like maybe God wanted me to be single for longer because I might be a bishop in a singles ward someday, and these experiences would be really helpful to me in the future. That's never happened, and I really don't see it happening. Now I'm just grateful that I did eventually meet my wife, and we built a beautiful life together. But before I met her, I was in the process of letting go of the dream. I was making timelines and backup plans for myself because I really wanted to be a father, and I was going to make that happen even without an ideal partner match. Even though I kind of had a promise from God that things would work out for me at age 25, it was going to take a while. It was still the right choice for me to start letting go of that promise and take control of my life. I'm so glad that I met my wife and I can be a present father like I always dreamed. But it very easily could have not worked out that way. Starting to let go of the promises led me to greater happiness, and would have even if I never met my wife. I still would have been making more intentional choices for my future based on the real choices I had, rather than the baseless promises from the church. The next topic is the story of Ezra Booth. The story in the manual is that Ezra Booth witnessed that Elsa Johnson's arm was miraculously healed. After seeing it, Ezra was eagerly baptized. And yet, within just a few months, Ezra lost his faith and became critical of the prophet. The manual then criticizes Ezra for losing faith after witnessing a miracle. It leaves out a lot of salient details. Ezra Booth was a Methodist preacher. Elsa Johnson and John Johnson had the Johnson farm where Joseph and Emma later lived for a while. Elsa had rheumatism in her arm. Her son was recently converted, and she went to see Joseph Smith to ask him to heal her arm. People did describe the healing as miraculous. Ezra Booth was baptized shortly thereafter and then ordained a high priest and called on a mission to Missouri. As we discussed, Missouri was bleak. I think it could be enough to lose your testimony that you're told you're headed to Zion and then the reality is anything but. I'm sure that contributed. But what really disillusioned Ezra is that he kept trying to heal people and it wasn't working. As any scientist knows, if you cannot repeat the results of a study, then those first results are suspect and unreliable. I'm sure it made Ezra reconsider Elsa's arm healing miracle. There is a major placebo-like effect in faith healing. And rheumatism isn't a super clear case for healing. The symptoms can come and go. It's not like a bone that was clearly broken was suddenly intact and healed. Ezra Booth became one of the first published critics of Joseph Smith, getting 9 letters published in the Ohio Star paper. In Revelations in Context, a church-published source, it completely omits Ezra's many failed attempts at healing, and it criticizes Ezra Booth for later becoming an agnostic. I don't think that's a fair reading of his life. After his 6 months in Joseph Smith's church, Ezra rejoined the Methodists. He became a follower of William Miller, who predicted Christ's second coming would be in 1843 or 1844. When that didn't happen, Ezra and many others joined the Shakers. It seems like he left the Shakers in 1850. So it was almost 20 years after his dealings with Joseph Smith before Ezra considered himself an agnostic. Ezra's faith failed him several documented times. I don't think it's surprising his faith evolved over time toward agnosticism. The last topic I'm going to discuss is chaste thoughts. In Doctrine and Covenants, section 63, Joseph Smith repeats the verse from Matthew that says, "Whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery already in his heart." The manual took this as an opportunity to lecture about chaste thoughts. I was surprised because I would not have picked out this topic from these sections. It's fairly tangential. Personal story time. I think when I was about 28, I was getting my temple recommend renewed by the stake. The man doing the interview had been my singles ward bishop previously. After the law of chastity question, he asked me something along the lines of, how do I keep my thoughts chaste? I was a little taken aback, and I replied, I don't. I think sexuality is good, and I don't repress sexual thoughts. I enjoy them. I was single at the time, and I think I also said, I obey the law of chastity. My thoughts are all I have to enjoy right now. He replied, isn't it interesting that so many people fear their God-given sexuality, even though that's not what the church teaches? Again, I was a little surprised. I replied that I agree with the doctrine that sexuality is good, but the messaging of the church absolutely is that sexuality is dangerous. We just wrapped up the interview after that. Anyway, I still have basically the same thoughts about keeping our minds chaste. It's counterproductive. If we try to repress our sexuality, it will do us harm. It tells us that our sexuality is bad and sinful. It makes it really difficult to develop a healthy attitude towards sexuality. Without that, marriage can be really difficult. I guess what I'm saying is, Do not teach people to keep their thoughts chaste. Teach them to be curious about their sexual thoughts and consider what they say about themselves. When we consider the data from conservative states where abstinence-only sex education is taught, the results are grim, the opposite of the stated goals. It's not healthy to teach repression of sexuality. I wish that we would stop teaching that repression within the church and embrace the doctrine that sexuality is a divine gift. Our bodies are to be enjoyed. We can still teach the law of chastity without demonizing sexuality and making generations of people afraid of a key part of themselves. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening. Please share with family and friends. Until next time.